Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is the first in our series of Build by or Partner webinars with Mark Brodeur, Vice President of Digital Innovation for Nestlé, and moderated by a friend of Radicle, Dave Knox. My name is Stu Willson. I'm the CEO of Radicle. Before I hand it off to Mark and Dave a bit on why we're here. So I believe that investing in the future has never been more important, but doing it effectively is really hard. And so we want to share perspectives and best practices from those on the forefront of big company innovation. How are they responding to this changing environment? How do they make decisions about what markets to enter? How do they decide what opportunities to pursue? Those are all things that we'll be discussing today, as well as all of your questions. So who are we? This is not a marketing webinar, so I'll be super quick. Radicle is a research and insights business that helps the world's leading companies, customers like Nestlé, Silicon Valley Bank, IKEA, Lilly, and many others, make faster and better informed investments in the future by identifying and uncovering the latent expertise and domain experience and insights of startup founders, leaders, and investors. If you want to find more, you can go to our website. So we're excited to have Dave moderate a session with Mark. Mark is Vice President of Digital Innovation, as I noted, for Nestlé. He's also leader of Nestlé's Silicon Valley Innovation Outpost, a team of 20+ marketing and technical employees whose goal is to build new and potentially breakthrough digitally enabled services and new business models with a focus on enhancing consumers' lives. Dave is a leading consultant, speaker, and coach. He's focused on closing the gap between Fortune 500s and entrepreneurship through innovation, marketing, and digital transformation. He's been CMO of Rockfish. He's been co-founder of The Brandery, one of the top 10 startup accelerators in the US. He's also author of the best-selling book, Predicting the Turn, the high-stakes game of business between startups and blue chips. Check it out on Amazon. I didn't get the affiliate link set up, unfortunately, so I'm not gonna make any money from this. But with all that, I'll hand it off to Dave and Mark. And again, thank you too for being here, and thank you all for being here.
Awesome.
Stu, thanks.
Stu, it's a pleasure. Appreciate you having me. And Mark, looking forward to a fun conversation here. So.
Likewise. Thanks for the invite.
Great. So, we're going to be doing kind of the formal Q&A at the end, but what I'd ask everyone is throughout, if you have things, toss them out, share the questions, the Q&A. I'm, as Mark is doing his beautiful answers, I'll be monitoring that Q&A at the bottom. So toss in and we'll be able to do this throughout the whole thing. But Mark, I want to start with you just talking a little bit more about kind of your background at Nestlé, and then we'll dive into what Svio is.
Perfect. Well, again, thanks so much for having me. Really looking forward to this, and always great to spend time with both of you. So yeah, my background, so 25+ years in the food industry, and all of that time actually with Nestlé. Pretty diverse career. I've had a lot of opportunities, which has been terrific in the company. Started off in sales, kind of learned early on the importance of grit. Had the opportunity to transition into marketing, where I was fortunate to work on some big businesses, important businesses from our pet care side of things, and then pivoted a bit about 12 years or so ago into environmental sustainability, where I spent 6 or 7 years. And in my most recent gig, which has been also around that same amount of time, 6 or 7 years, is leading digital innovation for Nestlé globally, along with a group of very smart people, some of whom are on the call, and looking to really sort of accelerate our innovation agenda, leveraging new and emerging technologies and partners to really help drive growth for our organization. And as you said, Stu, to help enhance consumers' lives. And I'd love to talk a little bit more about that as we go.
So let's talk a little bit about that leading digital innovation. You kind of hinted a little bit what that is. You're doing this through the Silicon Valley Innovation Outpost. So can you give the history, what led to Svio kind of being started, and what has evolved over the last 7 years?
Yeah, so in the beginning, it was a pretty basic hypothesis that we wanted to prove out, which was by getting closer to where innovation was happening. So getting out of headquarters, getting out of our offices, and really getting here, in the case of San Francisco and Silicon Valley, it was really trying to understand where we could leverage our presence and our partnerships with companies big and small, and with other innovators, be it venture capitalists, accelerators, incubators, and the like, to bring new value and, importantly, new opportunities to Nestlé and hopefully new solutions to consumers. So we're a pretty unique team in a variety of different ways. One I already alluded to is the fact that we don't sit in headquarters, a very purposeful decision. We're a very cross-functional team. So the team is actually made up both of commercial folks, so my side of things, and I have a partner in crime who is the chief innovation officer for IT. So we have a commercial and technical team, very purposeful by design, made up of folks who have spent quite a while at Nestlé, myself, for example, and my counterpart, and also a lot of folks who are relatively new to Nestlé that bring a variety of different perspectives and experiences to bear. In the end of the day, it's really all about how do we leverage these partnerships? How do we leverage technologies to allow us to innovate beyond what we call the core? And in our case, the core is product. So think about how do we launch new services, kind of wraparound services that can ultimately enhance and elevate our brand and product portfolios to deliver value in new ways.
So a few times there, you mentioned that the structure, whether it's cross-functional or location, was purposeful by design. So when you thought about that origin story, how did you go about those decisions of saying, here's the geography, we want this to be cross-functional instead of just marketing? Like what led you through each of those choices?
Yeah, listen, maybe one obvious point right off the bat is, we understand and appreciate that innovation is happening all over the world. It's not just sort of a Silicon Valley or San Francisco thing. That said, in terms of where we decided to sort of set up shop back in 2013, 2014, Silicon Valley is still sort of the epicenter of technology-powered innovation. And we know, too, that in terms of venture dollars, in terms of capital getting into the market, still the lion's share of that money is still originating from here. But then also, the number of entrepreneurs that are setting up shop here and that are getting their start here are many, many thousands. So for us, it just seemed like a logical place to start in trying to get closer to these different players and to learn, but importantly also to contribute. The other thing, though, to your second question, Dave, is when we started, it was just two of us. It was myself and one other marketer. And really, it was trying to understand how this place operated, trying to understand, again, where Nestlé could contribute based on our expertise and based on our scale. And what we realized pretty quickly is that there were many opportunities, but it was important, if we were to realize those opportunities, we needed to have not only a laser view of sort of the consumer and understand the consumer needs, but importantly, understand the technologies that can help enable these new opportunities. So not being a technologist myself, this is when we sort of realized that, listen, we need to build this cross-functional team of internal experts, but folks that come from the outside too, to help us see new opportunities, but more important, realize them.
That makes sense. So when you thought about that, influencing that strategy and kind of building it out, how did you think about that mix then between internal Nestlé employees versus, as you said, bringing folks in from the outside?
Yeah, listen, it's a balance, right? And for us, it was really important to get that balance right. So Nestlé is a very large company. So we're the world's largest food and beverage company. We, in annual revenues, we're close to $90 billion. We have about 270,000 employees, if not more. A portfolio, we're a house of brands. So we have a portfolio of over 2,000 brands, global brands, regional brands, local brands. It was really important to ensure that we were able to operate within this very large and very decentralized company. And that's a really important point. Nestlé, more than many other multinationals, is extremely decentralized. And it's very purposeful because food is local and we're a food and beverage company. So it was really important to have someone like myself, I think, and to have my counterpart, Goran, who also has had a number of years with Nestlé, who has relationships, who has worked in the business, who really knows how the business operates, understands the culture. But at the same time, it was just as important for us to bring in folks from the outside that had an objective perspective, that had experience where we didn't. And really this balance, this mix of personalities, cultures, backgrounds became really important to create sort of a healthy tension within our team to keep pushing us to move faster, to keep pushing us to ask the tough questions, and to keep pushing us forward.
So you mentioned there that Nestlé, like many CPGs, is a very decentralized business. So where exactly does SVIO fit in the overall organization from a reporting structure and then maybe the dotted lines throughout the company?
Yeah, there's a lot of dotted lines, but the reporting structure is pretty black and white. So as I mentioned, we're Nestlé's global digital innovation team focusing on these consumer-facing opportunities. So maybe not surprising, I report into our global CMO, and my counterpart, Goran, reports into our global CIO. So our strategy is aligned. It's very much about looking for new opportunities to drive growth. But again, it's powered by these partnerships and these technologies. So what's really important there is that we have executive sponsorship and we have clear priorities and aligned goals. Now, in terms of those dotted lines or sort of indirect, it's not so much that we have dotted lines into others, but there's dependencies and interdependencies, as you can imagine, because again, we're a relatively small team of 20 or so people in a company of 270,000. So our ability to be effective and move the needle is dependent upon our ability to leverage our perspective, our learnings, our failures, and share those, and ultimately use those as a sort of springboard and a jumping off point to really push people to think differently about new opportunities, again, in new areas.
And when you think about those 20 people, is it more rotational as people are coming through for tours of duty, if you will? Or are you looking for more of that longevity in the role?
Yeah, so actually it's a bit mixed. So about 2/3 of our team are full-time employees, again, either from within Nestlé in different markets, in different groups within Nestlé, but 1/3 of them are actually part of what we call our digital immersion program. And Dave, I think you're well aware that we have a similar program called the Digital Acceleration Team, which is based in Vevey. But the digital immersion program, it's essentially 6 to 10 high potential manager level folks typically that we bring in from around the world. And they come and they sit with us in Silicon Valley. They're working with us day in and day out. We do pretty extensive training on how to leverage many of the tools that we use, which are oftentimes different than the tools that many others across the organization use. Real leveraging tools like growth hacking, where we're building things at least virtually to begin with before we actually build a physical prototype. So we're giving them experience with new tools. We're leveraging them to work on these projects. And the idea is that they will go back inspired, better informed, and better and more effective at driving change in the technology area, which is where they come from.
So I want to dive into that a little bit more as you think about that team. Every business needs to have KPIs. What are you measured? What is success? And it sounds like you have a blend between some of those KPIs being for the business and some of them in a way being capability building of developing people throughout the organization and that capability. How do you think about those KPIs and what success looks like?
Yeah, it's a great question. So our sweet spot, like when I think about what we do well, I think there's a number of things that we do well. I think one is to really look out 3 to 5 years, to look for those signals, to understand how consumer behavior is changing and how technology is sort of driving or maybe enabling some of that change. And it's really important for us to be able to sort of bring that back to what are the potential implications, both good or bad, for Nestlé? And then how do we then take that next step in terms of designing these new propositions, these new services, these new solutions? The KPIs, though, differ pretty significantly between whether we're launching a new service or, to your point, if we're working to train folks within our team. But either way, it's focused on adding value, right? I mean, like our team would be here for 6 months, not 7 years, if we weren't finding ways to add meaningful value to the organization. But so the KPIs, I would say in the case of these new propositions, and we can talk more about those in a few minutes, there are a number of factors, but it's ultimately about, can we move the needle in terms of finding new ways to monetize these services and ultimately build higher levels of loyalty and trust with our brands. And really, those are the sort of higher level KPIs that are pretty consistent across the board.
And when you think about how you move the needle for the company, do you have a group of, let's call them internal products, that you are using at your disposal to do some of that work?
Yeah, what you mean by products or tools, I mean, so listen, our approach is, as I mentioned, leveraging many of the same tools or some of the same tools that startups use. The way we operate is, first, again, it's always starting with the consumer. So given these trends, given behavioral change, and given sort of pain points that consumers have, and it may be as simple as, in the pandemic, I'm sick and tired of cooking, how can I get ready, prepared meals that are healthy and nutritious that my entire family will like? Convenience, it could be tied to health, it could be tied to value. It's really starting kind of with, what are we solving for? And then really it's developing some initial hypotheses that we work to test quickly, leveraging oftentimes virtual tools, again, like growth hacking, where we're not moving to the next stage of actually building something, but we're actually trying to understand whether there's a good product market fit. And we're trying to understand if consumers are responding positively to the idea. And then at the same time, it's looking at who are the companies out there. And this is where, we've leveraged Radicle very successfully over the last few years, is who are the companies or what are the technologies that can become kind of key enablers to make the concept a reality. But it's going through that sort of iterative process of starting with, what are we trying to solve for, building those initial hypotheses that we prove through the development of concepts and the optimization of concepts. And then when we get to a point where either we see that we've met our success criteria or not, we decide to move forward, take it to the next step in terms of build and deploy, pilot, or exit stage left and move on to the next thing.
So when you think about those different areas and those different things you want to solve for, how do you think about what's driving those? Is it more thematically driven, kind of a top down of here's buckets of things we want to look at? Or is it bottoms up where it's kind of be driven by the company and your stakeholders and everything else? Or is it a blend?
Yeah, it's a bit of a blend, and it's been a pretty meaningful shift over time. So when we first started, again, not knowing kind of which end was up in some respects, it was really just trying to pick one or two businesses to try to figure out how can we be helpful to them. Not being in HQ, being out here, building the relationships that we were building, how can we help solve kind of near-term problems? So kind of coming up with better, faster, smarter solutions to address the needs of many marketers with new companies, new partners, and these emerging technologies. We then got to a point where we saw bigger opportunities there. But all that to say, our initial focus was very much kind of bottoms up. It was working to support businesses around the world to solve problems that they had. What we found, though, maybe not surprisingly, is oftentimes the view was very short term. And it was sort of incremental opportunities, which is not a bad thing when you're talking, again, about Nestlé, right? Incremental, like small incremental improvements at scale can have a meaningful impact to our business, but also to consumers. But for us, it was really saying, we've got to be more choiceful because we're kind of spreading ourselves too thin and sort of working bottoms up. So really, we've moved from a situation where it was kind of a pull approach, where we were waiting for briefs and taking briefs, of course, with specific criteria, to now more of a push approach. And why that's important is, again, it was very purposeful to set up shop outside of HQ. We have a view that's further out. We see opportunities and connect dots maybe that some of our business partners that have to deliver the numbers here and now aren't able to see. And importantly for us, it was, what are those 2 or 3 big areas of opportunity that we think can be transformational based on where Nestlé has been, but maybe more importantly, where Nestlé needs to go to stay relevant, to drive growth, especially for a company like ours, again, as big as we are, like small incremental improvements aren't going to drive meaningful share price improvements or meaningful growth overall. That's going to come from big ideas and also likely big acquisitions.
So I want to dive in a little bit more on that point you just made of, your peers are folks that have to deliver the business. They have to deliver the numbers, keep the revenue. There's going to be times where what you discover is in direct conflict to the day-to-day and maybe a chance to disrupt a current business. How do you balance that working with the peers that are used, they know what they're in today, and a threat 5 years from now might not be what they're worried about?
Yeah, listen, I mean, it's a great question. It's not always an easy one to answer. I mean, the folks that are running the business, we have many of them that are running big businesses, successful businesses, really smart people, really open-minded. But again, their ability to sort of look around the corner sometimes can be limited for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is in a time like ours, like trying to adapt and deal with all the many challenges that come with operating in a COVID reality, even pre-COVID, it's tough. So for us, it's really helping them see where these opportunities might be and start to build the initial business case and sort of the reasons to believe that some of these things that are kind of early signals are going to become stronger. So it's looking at these signals, trying to also look at or try to grasp sort of the foresight and such that we can paint a picture with kind of the proof points along with it as to what that future state could be. Now, we also talk about what could that mean both in sort of a positive way if we take some initial steps to learn and to do. And we also talk if we don't start to move in this direction through experimentation and the type of work that we do, what are the potential risks as well? But it can be difficult because, again, when you're talking about 3 to 5 years out, that time horizon seems like an eternity away. But given the changes that have happened, and especially given what's happening now in terms of technology advancements when it comes to nutrition, health, and wellness, those are going to have some pretty profound impacts for Nestlé.
When you guys kind of decide on your focus, what you say yes to and what you say no to is almost of equal importance. So
right.
When you thought about your boundaries, how do you decide what's the things you're going to say, that's not us, that's either somebody else at Nestlé or, whatever that might be?
Yeah, listen, as I mentioned, when we first started, it was very much about trying to figure out where we can best add value. And it was very much focused on kind of the here and now, not the new and the next. So one of the things that we did after the first year or two is after sort of proving out our initial hypothesis is we said, listen, there are a lot of really smart people who are tasked with the here and now. We have center of excellence teams in our businesses at a local level to global level who really are all about optimizing and improving what we have today. So we just said, okay, anything that's kind of in the 6 to 12 month window, that's not us. It was then really about how do we look out again 3 to 5 years and look for those opportunities that maybe push us beyond where we've been, but really push us to where we need to be. And so for us, it's looking at that time horizon being more like 12 to 24, even to 36 months out, and looking at, again, opportunities to move beyond just selling products. So for example, I'll give you 2 maybe quick examples in that regard. We're one of the largest pet food companies in the world, and we're the largest infant food company in the world. For us, we recognize that consumers are looking for more than just food when it comes to, if you're, for example, a new pet parent like we are with a puppy, is yeah, food's important, but you're looking for information, you're looking for insight, you're looking for support. So in the context of our evolution inside of sort of our time horizon, it's looking at how can we go from just being a pet food company to really being a pet care company. And there's so many interesting ways to add value to consumers and leverage the experience that we have, both from a product standpoint, from a science standpoint, and from an insight and experience standpoint that can be monetized and that can add value.
On that note of the kind of the time horizon, so you're in Silicon Valley, the heart of venture capital for the most part, and they by nature are looking 3 to 5 years, even 5 to 10 years out for their themes. but they're making investments today for a future that they see tomorrow. How do you, if you see something that's a really interesting opportunity today, that fits the theme of where you see things are going, what do you do with that? And how do you balance that with where you share it with the organization and elsewhere?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the things that our team has always done well, and we did a lot of it, especially before the pandemic, is we spend a lot of time with executive management, all the way up to and including our executive board. And over the course of any given year, again, pre-pandemic, we would have anywhere between 100 to 200 executives. Could be CEOs and their leadership teams of different businesses. Could be, again, we had the entire executive board out the year before last. And that's one opportunity to expose them to these trends, to expose them to these really promising companies and solutions, and to be in a position sort of firsthand to immerse them in what the future could look like. And not just hear it from us, but to hear it from the VCs, to hear it from the people that are building these really amazing propositions that are changing lives or that have the potential to change lives. And that has been really impactful. So that's one way we do it. And that's an important way we do it. Also, though, it's working with our, for example, biz dev and M&A teams. So, while we don't have a venture like we're not a venture, officially have a venture arm, I should say, but we're always looking at deal flow opportunities. And we're seeing things clearly within our mandate, and that's what we focus on, but we're also seeing a lot of interesting things from a product innovation standpoint. I mean, Silicon Valley is also a hub of activity, as you know, for sort of plant-based and just many different sort of really breakthrough product innovation opportunities, and of course, also sustainability. So it's helping to connect the dots back to Nestlé being a huge global decentralized organization. It's trying to put entrepreneurs, venture capitalists in touch with the right people within Nestlé, and really try to help jumpstart those conversations so the right people see how these opportunities might evolve and where there might be opportunities for us down the road.
So I want to move the conversation a little bit from, we've talked a lot about the structure and the theory.
Sure.
Let's get into kind of the nuts and bolts of what you're living today. When you guys look at these themes, what are the ones that are really jumping to the forefront that have you most interested at the moment?
I talked before about really trying to keep our finger on the pulse of changing consumer behavior. It's no surprise over the last year in particular that we've all been struggling. We've all been trying to deal with this new normal, and especially when it comes to managing our health. Like, how do we stay active? How do we not put on weight? How do we not only focus on being safe, but how do we focus on really improving not just physical health, or at least maintaining it, but also dealing with sort of the emotional realities too. So think about lack of sleep, think about stress, think about all these other things that are becoming more and more important for us. So when we think about themes, this push towards self-care is one of those big themes. So proactive wellness, and where consumers more and more, based on the fact that in some instances don't have a choice, right? Because they're limited in terms of whether they can go to the doctor or not, are leveraging technology. They're leveraging, be it hardware, their Apple Watch, their phone, software. They're leveraging many of the solutions that companies in Silicon Valley and beyond are building that provide insight, information in real time to help people make better decisions on how to improve their physical and emotional well-being. To us, that is a very exciting space where Nestlé is a 150-year-old company who invests upwards of $1.7 to $1.8 billion a year in primary science and nutritional research can and should play. It's a question of how. But that would be one example of sort of thinking about food as medicine and the sort of evolution of self-care and the importance of self-care, physical and emotional. Really exciting space as one example.
What about on the, you mentioned kind of software is a big focus for you. So what about in that space are you looking at of how the digital manifestation of food and wellness and everything else? So there are other themes that you're paying attention to?
Yeah, listen, other themes within health and well-being. I mean, it's such a big space, as you know. I mean, we're looking at software and hardware as well that tie to, for example, the focus on healthy aging. We look at in the next 20, 30 years, I believe the number of people over the age of 50 are going to double. And that's upwards of 3 billion people around the world. And people not only want to live longer, but they want to live better, back to what I just mentioned. So if you look at innovation that's happening within this space, if you look at venture dollars that are going in there, it's kind of off the charts. And if you look again at how food can help address physical and emotional need states, there's a lot of interesting angles. But software, with the advancements in software and hardware, there's a lot of really interesting things that can help address sort of life stage needs, but also needs around specific disease states as well. Think diabetes, think obesity, and the like.
So related to that, we're seeing a lot of interesting trends in the retail space, and especially with what COVID has caused with, whether it's automated retail or delivery or touchless checkout, et cetera. How is Nestlé and your team in particular looking at some of those more technology-driven retail trends?
Yeah, listen, I think, of course, a lot of the innovation that was already happening in these areas, of course, was just dramatically accelerated, and there's kind of no going back. Consumers, whether they're shopping in sort of a traditional retail environment or more and more, of course, in an online environment, want convenience. They want what they want when they want it and where they want it. And when it comes to thinking about the future of retail and thinking about how technology can continuously improve convenience, access, personalization, and the like, I mean, there's just a number of really exciting places. For us, as we look at things like touchless, we see that becoming the new norm, right? So if you're thinking about Nespresso, Nespresso, about half of the business that we've done historically has been done in brick and mortar boutiques. So you can imagine like looking at touchless in ways to create more of a frictionless, easy in, easy out sort of retail experience, super important. And that's also true when you think about our professional business, our food service business. We don't want consumers, to have to touch machines. So back to software and integration with hardware, a lot of the technologies that have been evolving and have really matured over the last year are now being leveraged. And those are definitely areas that our team's looking at. Also, grab and go technology, kind of Amazon Go like technology. We also see that not just for our sort of physical retail locations, which are limited mostly to Nespresso, but I think a lot of those technologies and trends are, of course, only going to become even more prevalent and more ubiquitous, and it's going to have an impact on us and every other manufacturer as well.
So when you find a startup that kind of fits the mandate, it fits the areas you're looking at, and seems like a really interesting one, what does a partnership look like? How does your team get involved with a startup? How do you involve the businesses? What's that play out?
Yeah, it's a good question. So what I would say is, we've learned a lot in the last 7 years in working, especially with startups, because Nestlé, honestly, prior to that, had limited experience with the exception of R&D. R&D's always been working with universities and emerging sort of technology companies and universities and the like. So for us, it's been important to sort of understand what's going to be necessary to be effective within Nestlé. So in other words, you have to be at a certain level of maturity, and you have to be willing to sort of deal with the realities of Nestlé to a point. I mean, we're constantly optimizing our approach to be faster and to be more effective at working with early stage companies. But what I would say we're looking for companies that bring something truly unique, of course, to the table. Companies that have similar values as us, that see kind of the world in the same way, and that provide sort of complementary capabilities and solutions to us. We're not a technology company. I mean, we're a big multinational company. We're not nearly as agile as we need to be. And that's why, working with companies who are technology companies, agile startups, and are very innovative, we try to find that marriage. It's not easy, but it's really important.
I love that. That makes total sense. So when you start going down a path, A lot of times companies will get involved with the company and that startup is really exciting. It becomes a really important part. What if one of those things you've said yes to starts to turn out to falter and not be the right fit? How do you manage through that?
Yeah, listen, I mean, I think at the end of the day, the only thing we really have is our reputation. And for us, we've also learned the hard way that, resource constrained startups who are really needing to move quickly to find that product market fit and continuously optimize, they can't wait around for big company Nestlé to decide what to do. So like we've really worked to manage expectations up front, to really say, hey, this is what, if this is to work on our side, this is what we'll need. And we need to understand from you as well, what's going to be required from us. So it's really trying to have that open and honest conversation, not just on day one, but throughout the relationship, and really being clear about kind of what the North Star is. And, oftentimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's getting to a point where, we're able to give the support or the answer that our partners need, in the perspective and support as quickly as they need it.
When you look at the work you guys have done over the last 7 years, what's one of those things that you're most proud of that's in the market now that you can kind of maybe actively talk about?
Yeah, I mean, over the 6-7 years that we've been kind of operating, we have developed probably 80 plus different propositions, services, business models, and about a third of those have hit the market. Our mandate or our focus is, as I mentioned before, kind of going from that initial concept, that initial idea, to a pilot. And once we get through that MVP development and test this proposition in market, if it's successful, we'll transition it to our business partners. And it could lead to a build out internally. It could lead to an investment in one of our partners. It could lead to an acquisition as well. The reason why I say that is because when we pass that baton, it's really up to the business, oftentimes with our support, to sort of incubate and take this proposition to the next level, to really get it to a point where it's ready to scale. And so a lot of the things that we hand off look different when they make it into market. So, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, it's about experimentation. It's about failing. It's about moving as quickly as we can. So long answer to your very short question, there are a number of things we're really proud of. And some of them haven't worked, or some of them, again, have made it to market but look different. Back to this whole theme of self-care and nutrition, health, and wellness. We recently worked with one of our businesses, Nestlé Health Science. We were working to help them address issues around morbidity. And we have a product called OptiFast, which you might be aware of, maybe not, where it's a very nutritionally dense product that is extremely effective at helping people who are overweight and morbidly so to lose weight. And it's a liquid only diet. And this is something that's prescribed by doctors. And basically what we did with the Nestlé Health Science team is, again, leveraging the science and leveraging technology, is really try to help folks that were making this transition to OptiFast to do it in the easiest and most effective way possible, but importantly, to help inform them, to help motivate them, is to give them support along the way, to help them see the progress that they were making, to give them a sense for sort of what comes next. And what we did is we developed, a kind of end-to-end experience, leveraging an app, but then also integrating connected devices, Apple Watch, Fitbit, also connected scales, to again, give them reassurance, give them support, give them information that was very tailored to them. And also on the flip side, to help them transition back from a liquid only sort of nutritional diet to one that includes a variety of healthier foods. So we're really proud of that, because it was all about putting diabetes in remission. It's received the final sort of product, which is in the UK and will be scaling out soon, has been recognized by the equivalent of the NIH in the UK. And those are the sorts of opportunities that we see having a lot of promise, because it's addressing, again, real consumer needs. It's adding value and leveraging Nestlé's strengths, but it's also opportunities for us to, increase our value proposition as well.
When you look back over the last 7 years, if you were giving advice to another, let's call it, say, large decentralized CPG or really any company looking to follow in your footsteps, what do you think you got right? And what lessons have you learned that you would suggest they kind of think about?
Boy, what we got right, I would say what we got right is sort of questioning everything and continuing to try to look at opportunities that are obvious and right in front of us and those that maybe are around the corner in as many different ways as possible, and kind of not giving up. And so it's a very vague answer, but I think, again, it goes back to sort of the culture that we've created within our team and the mix of people that we have in the team. It's constantly trying to push beyond no and trying to get people to find new ways to bring new insights and new opportunities to our business partners. And a lot of that comes through time, it comes through experience, it comes from tough conversations. It also comes from the engagements that we've had with a lot of the senior leaders before. So I think those immersions, those curated immersions where we've really invited folks from the top down in to sort of experience what we're seeing and to be part of what we're doing, that we got right. And I'd say that's been really effective. I think where we've fallen short, and maybe as we think about kind of our process and our approach, one of the things that we probably didn't get right until recently is we had a tendency to move quickly and very effectively from that initial concept to the MVP and pilot. And then when we saw that there was real promise based on our metrics being successfully met, we would transition too quickly and think that something that was still at a pilot phase would be in a position to be commercialized and scaled versus incubating it. And I would say we didn't get that right. And that was sort of the one thing that, if looking back, we would have done differently. We would have had a sufficient amount of time to really incubate these new services or new opportunities, because oftentimes there's new capabilities, there's new technologies. It's not just about launching it, but it's sustaining it. So I would say the incubation piece was one of those sort of big ahas that we probably didn't focus in on early enough.
So I want to go back to one of the very first things you've said, and you said it 7 years ago when you were just starting this off, is you asked yourself, how can we contribute to Silicon Valley? How do we contribute to the ecosystem, to the startups, to venture capital, to it as a whole? And that's not a mindset that everybody necessarily takes. Some take a measure of, let me meet with as many VCs as possible, as many startups. Doesn't matter what the follow through is, as long as I meet. So what has that word contribute meant when you started, and how has that evolved over the years?
Yeah, listen, I mean, talk is cheap, right? And everybody around here talks, and they talk a lot. But meaningfully adding value back to this ecosystem is so important, because the door is always open for the first time, but they can shut and stay shut depending upon how you operate. Whether you're someone who's trusted, whether someone who follows through, and whether you go in with an open mind in the best of intentions. And listen, the relationships, sometimes they evolve, sometimes they blossom, sometimes they materialize into something, especially on the venture side, into deals that we've done, acquisitions that we've made. Sometimes they don't, but it's really about being honest, being purposeful, following up, and really trying to figure out how we, as Nestlé, the largest food and beverage company in the world, with scale and resources that many of the portfolio companies that the venture folks are backing don't have, like, how can we genuinely offer those people up, experiences up, and sort of platforms up, and follow through on that stuff. So sorry, long answer, but I think what's really important is that it is something that you have to truly be committed to. It's not easy. This is a relationship game in large part, and it's a very important part of being successful here. And really not just here. I mean, insert, any other sort of ecosystem or hub, innovation hub around the world, the same thing holds true there. It's not just a Silicon Valley thing.
So that relationship thing is a really important part. So I want to click on that a little bit more, because one of the problems sometimes in large companies is you're used to being in the power position. You've got vendors and suppliers, and usually it's your purse strings that are dictated. that relationship game doesn't work when that power equation changes, because some of these innovative companies, if you've burned a bridge, they're going to go to your competitor before they go to you. So knowing that part of your mandate is helping change the culture of Nestle and train people on to think this way, how have you gotten that across of we need to have a different mindset when we think about being more externally focused, where the external partner is a partner, not just somebody we're writing a check to?
Yeah, it's a really good point. So listen, I think there's a understanding, a deep understanding that a lot of the smartest people in the world are outside of our four walls, and we really have to be more open-minded and more open to working with partners big and small. So that part, and that's not a new thing, but it's a relatively new thing, and I think it's now permeated both the executive board level all the way down. Like, we have to achieve growth in the future. Yes, we have to be more efficient and more effective of leveraging the resources we have, but we have to leverage partnerships even more effectively as well. When it comes to sharing the perspective that we have, the good and the bad, in terms of what we've done well and what we haven't done well, we do that often, and we do that in as many different ways as we can. But again, we're a large, decentralized organization, and this is where there's always a risk of someone's going to launch something in another part of the world. Maybe people aren't aware of it, and they're going to sort of make the same mistakes again. So a lot of it is just trying to leverage our internal networks and our relationships to share what we know, to share what we've learned, to give them examples of what hasn't worked. So for example, I remember one group said, hey, yeah, we just met with this really interesting company that does X, Y, and Z. And it was funny, it was a really good conversation until our legal person walked in, our first meeting. And I was like, why'd you invite the legal person? Well, we just thought it would be good to have NDAs. And I'm just like, but those things, you don't know what you don't know, right? So this is where, like, at the most basic level, share what you know, share what has gone poorly, and just try to be a voice of reason and a voice of support where you can.
So you've talked about the partnerships with startups and venture capitalists. Nestle, with the $2 billion roughly you spend a year on R&D, academic research has always been an important part. So does your team get involved with that as well, given Stanford and Berkeley and anything else? Or does that stay with the historical kind of R&D team?
Yeah, so our team definitely gets involved in universities, sort of working with universities like Stanford, but it's in a slightly different way, or maybe a considerably different way than, say, R&D would. So, for example, our team is working with Stanford when it comes to their work around the future of wearables and the future of connected technology. So they have a whole team of folks that are focusing on that space. And we have individuals within our team who are deep subject matter experts there and who are very much tapped in and contributing to those conversations. And we're also bringing in R&D, though, because this is a team sport, especially when you're talking about nutrition, because you're talking, yes, about technology, but there has to be science behind it. So we're also bringing R&D into the fold to figure out how might we leverage these relationships? How might we be actually a partner to test these technologies in R&D, in our own studies or studies with consumers? So it's very focused on our mandate of digitally powered innovation, sort of technology powered innovation, but thinking more holistically about kind of our group strategy around health and wellness.
So related to that, one of the things you've mentioned is you guys are a relatively small team, 20 people in a
very
company,
scrappy,
200,000 people.
Right.
How do you think about the dissemination of information and sharing the things you've learned, the companies you met with? Because, entrepreneurs are nothing if not, scrappy themselves, and they will try and meet with everybody that they can. So how do you share, hey, we've met this company and it's a really good fit, or hey, this isn't a good fit? So how do you think about just sharing information with a company so large and so decentralized?
It's not easy. It's not easy, but it's important. And, we use a variety of different tools, communication tools. So for example, Nestle is a big Facebook workplace fan. We have hundreds of thousands of people, or hundreds of thousands of people on Workplace. We share a lot there, but we also use tools like Startup Flow and others to track engagement with companies and really be in a position to share with very proactively if we see a company, if we see a solution, if there's something of interest to our business partners or other functions within the organization, to proactively reach out. But it's really trying to centralize that and have the right people have visibility to that information through these platforms. That's where it's probably the most effective way to do that. But I'd love to tell you we do it exceptionally well. I'd say we do it okay, but we need to get better.
Yeah, and is that one person's job in internal communications, or it's all 20 of you just need to be on top of that?
It's not just us, it's all 20 of us, but it's really all the other innovation teams as well. I mean, there are a number of other global innovation teams, R&D, for example, who are meeting with companies, maybe sometimes the same companies, to your point. We have the IT innovation team, which is looking at enterprise solutions and not just marketing and consumer facing solutions, but supply chain, ops, and so forth, technologies. So it's the opportunity and the responsibility of all these different groups to be open and share and to compare notes when we're talking to the same people.
Yeah, you mentioned all those different innovation teams. How at the top level, as the leader of SVIO and then the leaders of all these other innovation, how do you do that alignment and make sure that everyone's not respecting the swim lanes, but knows what each is tackling and kind of you have that alignment?
Yeah, we talk regularly. We talk very regularly. And I think the important thing to point out when it comes to our team versus, say, the R&D accelerators, and you might have heard we've launched a number of accelerators across the globe focusing on product and packaging innovation or sustainability related information, which is something very important to us. These are very capable teams that have complementary skill sets that are synergistic, and oftentimes we're working together on similar projects. So when I talk about sort of the theme of nutrition, health, and wellness and where the future of food is going, for us, it's important to leverage, of course, the scientist. It's important to leverage the technologists. It's important to leverage the commercial folks to sort of develop a proposition, be it again a wraparound service or an entirely new business model from the ground up, but looking at all of the different pieces to the puzzle. And the different innovation teams are kind of the fuel for that. So it's a very, again, as I said before, innovation is a team sport. And we are connecting regularly, and that's critically important.
Yeah, on that note of connecting, Nestle's been historically very acquisitive, but over the last few years, you've made some really interesting kind of moves into new adjacent spaces, et cetera. What role does SVIO play with those?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, we don't have a sort of formal venture role, but we're always looking at interesting companies that could play a really important role in sort of the future of Nestlé. And that's true within our mandate. And as I mentioned, I think before, it's true in sort of more pure product plays as well. But you're right. I mean, listen, acquisition, when you talk about a company of our size, incremental innovation, incremental sort of growth isn't going to move the needle. So acquisition is always going to be important. In the last 4 years, for example, Nestlé's done 75 deals. Some of them are small, some of them are really big. So for example, year before last, we were talking before about Starbucks. Nestlé now owns or has a perpetual license for all the Starbucks coffee sold outside of their retail stores. Those are high growth, margin accretive opportunities and spaces, but we've done just as many deals, even more deals I mentioned nutrition, health, and wellness and Nestlé Health Science. We've done even more deals around that theme because for us, moving from sort of mainstream food to food and services that are increasingly personalized and more targeted to meet your needs. I guess I mentioned physically and emotionally, that's really big. So we've made investments the last couple of years in immune therapy, which is around peanut allergies, and the list goes on and on. So it's an exciting time because our portfolio is evolving pretty dramatically. We're also divesting a lot of businesses that don't meet those same themes, and that's important.
So we've got just about a minute or so left here. If you thought about closing remarks and the advice you'd leave others that are thinking about their own innovation efforts, whether or not they've been given that mandate, or they want to make the case of why it's important for their company, what advice would you give them from your 7-year journey that Nestlé has had?
Yeah, I think it's a tough one to answer in a minute. I would say if you're given a similar opportunity to the one that I've been given or our team has been given, you're very fortunate. It's not easy, but it's super important, and now more than ever, to really be in a position to sort of see what's around the corner, but to try to make some sense of it and to try to get your organization to really get excited about what some of the possibilities are. So my advice would be persistent, be pragmatic, but be positive and really push. Run to the fire and look for the big challenges and the big opportunities. They may not be obvious and they may take time to sell in, but it's as important as ever to stay relevant and ultimately to be in a position to grow by doing that.
I love it. Well, I think that is the perfect note to end on. So I can't thank you enough for spending the time with us and sharing.
Really appreciate it, Dave.
You guys have been on.
And Stu, thanks so much. Great partnership there as well.
Yep. Thank you both for attending. Thank you all for attending. If you all have interest in other folks we should be featuring on this series, please email me and look for a transcript and a recording and some highlights in your inbox in the coming days.
Awesome.
Okay,
Thanks, guys.
everybody. Have a great day.
Take care.
Yeah.